Episode 84, The Economic Impact of STEM with Alex Greenberg.
We have the opportunity to, I think, really market New Mexico as an innovation hub where companies can come from out of state and find all the tech talent they need, all the access to capital they need, and all the general entrepreneurial support that you need to stand up a business within science and tech.
Welcome, fellow STEM enthusiasts, to the STEM Southwest podcast, your source for all things science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This podcast is designed to create STEM connections, cohesion, and elevation. This is a place where STEM enthusiasts gather to learn about some amazing STEM rock stars and activities of the Southwest and beyond that are impacting the world. If you have longed to be united with your fellow STEM nerds, then you've found your people here at STEM Southwest. And now, here are your hosts, Bob and Shelley.
Hey everybody, this is Bob.
And I'm Shelley.
Together we are STEM Southwest. We just finished a fun interview with Alex Greenberg. He is the Director of Science and Technology for the New Mexico and Economic Development Department.
All right, you got that out. It's a very long title.
Yes, I might have missed a word, but hey, it's very
all
long.
there.
And we
It's
talk
all
about
there.
the interview. It was fun. He's new to his position.
Mm-hmm.
He has a lot of excellent qualities that make him a good fit for this, and the type of person I would love to be focused on STEM here in the state. And we do learn a lot during the conversation.
Yes.
We hear the term science, the psychology of technology. So listen in on that. We go a little bit deeper on that. And what do you think, Shelley?
Well, I think some of the highlights for me, and I'll let our audience be the judge of it, but some of the highlights that I took away were just, number one, the openness that he brings to his position and his department, that they truly want to help and be a helping hand. Mm-hmm. And that those of us that are in science and technology, whether we own small businesses or large businesses, that we can reach out to the Economic Development Department and they're there to help. I've been privileged, our nonprofit, R4 Creating, is part of a project working with the Economic Development Department, and that has been a really great experience. So I think I can definitely say that he is a man of his word and they're standing behind that. Right. He talks a lot about human capital challenges, which was very interesting to me, and really is part of our platform of like, what are the challenges that we face with human capital and how are we addressing those?
And it's the type of human capital too. You may be a great scientist or something, but you may not be the right person to be the CEO.
Yes. Yeah,
and so,
that's the piece that I think that he brought here. We talk with a lot of amazing scientists and technology affiliated people, right? Engineers. But the difference is Alex is our very first state agency
correct
interview in this way. Maybe second. I did talk with somebody from the Department of Workforce Solutions, but no, you weren't on that
okay.
one. But then also he brings to the forefront of how we have this management shortage, and we need to fill that gap with some of our entrepreneurs and develop some of that financial savvy and even the mindset savvy, that right. We're not competing over the same pot, that in fact there's plenty for everyone at the table. And so I love that about his behavioral science background and how he's bringing that to the forefront in economic development. I wonder if our listeners have thought about how the work that they're doing is or will have economic impact on our state and on the country. We hosted a statewide robotics competition recently. And one of the things I was sharing with our student volunteers is, hey, look here, there's a whole busload of kids that came from Alamogordo, New Mexico, very southern part of New Mexico, southeastern part of New Mexico, all the way up here to Rio Rancho. And we talked about the economic impact of that. That's kind of a big deal. It's a bunch of hotel nights, it's food, it's tourism dollars, it's just a lot of different factors that impact economy,
Right.
and that we need to understand that and value that about ourselves, that we're bringing it. So he mentions a lot of great things.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the collegial environment. I'm a lover of history, so I was thinking about it as you were talking, that the people that came out west in the Southwest, they had this independent mindset. They wanted to face new challenges, but they couldn't do it alone. Oftentimes
No.
they had to have a sharing economy, and that's
Right.
kind of what New Mexico and the Southwest is like. It's more of a collegial environment that, as I mentioned again in an interview, it's all ships rise. It's not one, having your own corner of the universe and nobody can intervene in that you're working together, because we know when we work together collectively, we're much more powerful versus doing things in our own specific lanes.
Right. Well, I do think it is still, with that mindset, it can still be easy to get siloed into a particular category.
Correct.
And so I just want to challenge all of you listening and watching today to listen closely to the wisdom that Alex brings to this interview, and to share it with others, and to reach out. Take a moment today and reach out, so that you're not siloed, that you're continuing to advance not only yourself but others. I think about amazing organizations that we have partnered with, that just such great value, such great opportunity, and just really, it's such an important part of doing business in the state.
Well, reframe your mind too. It's like, I think oftentimes when you look at an entity or an individual as a competitor, maybe reframe your mind and decide, how can this person be a partner with me, and we can do something collectively together versus always fighting each other.
Absolutely. All right. So with that wisdom, let's meet Alex.
Hey everybody, Shelly and I are here today, and we are at a first.
A first?
Yes. Today
I thought we were at the 83rd episode or something like that.
But this is the first kind of episode we've had.
Oh, okay.
So
wait for it.
Yeah, wait for
I'm
it.
waiting for it.
We have Alex Greenberg, who is the Director of Science and Technology Office for the New Mexico's Economic Development Department. That is a mouthful.
That is a mouthful.
Now,
let's just go with an EDD or something like that.
But we're going to really emphasize the science and technology part
Yes,
today.
we are.
We're STEM Southwest. Very good.
Right.
Anyway, so we're really happy to have Alex here today. Alex, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I apologize for the obnoxious title. I try to give everybody a caveat on the front end that it's long and tedious.
Well, fortunately, you have an easy name to remember, so that's what we're gonna focus on you, Alex. And Alex is fairly new to his position, but he has a pretty extensive background. I think that makes him really a good fit for this position. And so, Alex, what we typically do with our guests is we have them share a little bit about themselves, their STEM story. How did they, where did they start ultimately, and where they are right now? So the floor is yours.
That sounds good. And I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm glad to be here today. I'll start by talking about technology in general. I had a great mentor going to UNM named Steve Walsh, and he used to always say, inventions are the stuff you make and technology is how you make stuff. So I like to think of STEM in a very broad way and try to incorporate as many different sort of sectors as possible. But I got started within UNM, getting my bachelor's in psychology, and then ultimately got my MBA from UNM as well, concentrating in management of technology. And I was really excited that it turned out to be sort of the psychology of technology. So it fit really well with my initial bachelor's degree. And then I became sort of interested in industrial organizational psychology, and along with management technology, really deals with the human capital dimensions of diffusion of innovation. And got my opportunity to work as an intern for a biomedical startup in Albuquerque called Vision Quest Biomedical that was looking at commercializing an algorithm as a software to detect diabetic retinopathy. And again, saw that the human capital challenges were really, significant in the diffusion of innovation, even though it was a technical and, AI-powered software, that it was the human challenges that we had to overcome to actually get adoption. And then similarly, looking at value-based healthcare as with my background as a clinical project manager for the Christus St. Vincent Regional Cancer Center, looking at the best practices for value-based healthcare, and which mostly revolved around outcomes measurement, and why that was so much of a challenge to sort of get adopted within healthcare, where they're very rigid in their methodologies and their best practices. And then ultimately joined the economic development department last year, actually almost a year to the day, as a financial program specialist. And then a few months ago, my great predecessor, Mariah Tomar, moved on to greener pastures. And so I had the opportunity to step up in her place. And so while there's some big shoes to fill, I'm really excited about the opportunity, and it sort of goes, it was really a serendipitous fit with my previous experience.
Wow. So his experience and all that just came, that's even longer than the title. That's a lot. We could talk about that for a while. And I have to say also very serendipitous, as on Wednesday, I'm headed to Socorro to interview your predecessor for another project that I'm working on. So that's pretty fun. But
at a campus where there are greener pastures is actually
yes,
you're sure to be impressed with her. She's incredible, and she continues to be a huge resource for the department, and for me personally, trying to onboard and accelerate up the learning curve. She's been absolutely instrumental.
Amazing.
So something you said as you're providing your background, you used the term psychology of technology. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you dig a little bit deeper into that? Because I with all our interviews, I've never heard that term.
From a definition standpoint, the concentration I had was management and technology, getting my master's in business administration. But coming from a bachelor's in psychology, it really occurred to me that it was mostly just the psychology of technology, how it interacts with the environment and how it sort of progresses along a geometric progression. And I sort of, one of my nerd interests is I devour everything behavioral science related. And so it really struck me that so much of technology adoption was a human capital challenge, between operating under maximum cognitive load, present bias, and unrealistic optimism. There's a number of cognitive biases that stand in our way of interpreting new information or being willing to try new things. And so much of a new technology revolves around how to frame technology and how to get it adopted, especially beyond sort of the early adopters and early majority, so that the full market has access to it. And so much of it is a psychological challenge. And there's just a lot of opportunity for applying behavioral insights principles to technology in order to get it adopted. And that's been my favorite thing about working in this sector so far.
That's amazing. That causes me to go real deep here with some thoughts, and really pulls out that psych nerd in me as well. This whole idea of human capital and the challenges that we face with it is particularly of interest to me. How do you see that playing out to the typical tech business owner?
So like some of the new technologies that we have the opportunity to work with, I think we're still in the early phases of the diffusion of innovation for behavioral science best practices. Historically, people look at psychology as a soft science that really doesn't belong in the big leagues with the other sciences like STEM, obviously. But there's been a lot of interesting reports in terms of causal inference about the legitimacy of different trials and research within psychology, and extended into behavioral science, where I think the main adopters have been finance and healthcare for the most part, and also high consequence systems. So Sandia does a great job of incorporating the human element into high consequence systems. I had an opportunity to work on a project with them regarding the implementation of human readiness levels, which was a scale developed in conjunction or sort of as a sequel to technology readiness levels. And technology readiness levels came from when the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded, and they determined that it was a communications failure that was really the root cause. Obviously, it was the O-ring that actually caused the explosion, but it was a communication failure or breakdown between the engineering group and another group that actually sort of, provided a path for that catastrophic failure. And so they determined, looking at a feasibility study, that some of the best utility of the technology readiness levels was the conversations that it spawned. And so similarly, there is an opportunity for human readiness levels where the proactive consideration of the human component in high consequence systems was not only validated from a cost benefit analysis, but it also had sort of keystone habit approach in terms of latent benefits attached to it. And so there's a real opportunity for incorporating the human element in systems that is largely overlooked. And the challenge is to bring it beyond high consequence systems like nuclear weapons and healthcare, where catastrophic failure can be measured in human lives, and to get it adopted in more regularly in systems that may not have that kind of level of seriousness involved with them. And so it's been a challenge getting it adopted, sort of that proactive consideration of the human element in businesses generally. But I think it's moving through the diffusion of innovation stage, and it should be available more readily, I think, as we go forward, especially with so much great literature and research going into the decision science and nudge and noise and the sort of the behavioral science pillars that we have available.
That is fascinating. And I can't even imagine, like, I think it could take us a while to unpack all of those topics for sure, but let's back up just a little bit. I think Bob had a question about.
Let's back up to my first comment first. What I didn't really elaborate on is we've had guests from private, public, nonprofits and all that, but you are the first person we have spoken with from a state agency. And so I'm interested, as far as science and technology at the state level, what your specific responsibilities are as the director.
Primarily, I get to administer a couple of grants through the office. We are just in the process of developing our press release for the science and technology high growth grants that are going out. And so we'll be awarding 8 companies $25,000 to continue their business development in New Mexico in a wide variety of science and tech industries. And so that's going to be really exciting. I wish I could share more with you now, but I think the rest of the announcement hopefully will be coming this week. And then we also have a small business innovation research matching grant that we allocate through the office, phase 1 match for $25,000 and a phase 2 match for $100,000. And we were able to award 5 companies this fiscal year. And both those grants will be renewed for next fiscal, which starts in July. And then I also get to chair the Technology Research Collaborative, which is a board of 3 of the research universities in the state: Sandia Labs, Los Alamos National Labs, the Air Force Research Laboratory, the president of the New Mexico Angels, and then a venture capital group. And so it's a really exciting opportunity to try to get all the best minds in the room and see what we can come up with. And hopefully we'll be forming a retreat and recatalyzing our mission and vision and trying to get some growth for New Mexico. And then lastly, we're in the process of administering a DOE grant for cybersecurity. And so the combination of administering and applying for grants takes up a lot of the time, but the work with the Technology Research Collaborative and then getting in the community to meet entrepreneurs and work with small businesses have been my favorite parts of the job.
So we've been hearing a lot of talk, and we actually spoke with a number of individuals about cyber security and all that. So why the focus in your office right now?
It's just one of the 9 targeted sectors within the state. And if you look at sort of the trends of what's been happening with ransomware and some of the attacks, even on like Albuquerque public schools, the danger of not having cybersecurity is going to become more and more prevalent. And so the proactive consideration of humans and high consequence systems, it's something that you need to invest in on the front end so that it doesn't have some kind of tailwind or extreme consequence as a result. And so because of how new we are with some of these technologies related to cybersecurity, there's a ton of opportunity, including intellectual property spin out from Sandia and Los Alamos, that makes training a lot easier in this state than it would be in others. And so it's a matter of selecting the subject matter experts, finding companies who would benefit it, including any type of federal or state contractor, and then connections to everybody, and can sort of work up their the most recent protocols, which are now the CMMC 2.0, and we're moved on from 1.0, which is sort of the threshold for federal contracts, and it's more than likely to be more widely adopted going forward. And so being able to meet this threshold of cybersecurity is going to become increasingly important, I think.
Well, certainly science and technology is bringing, innovation is key in all of this, right? And supporting innovation. I imagine that's obviously through the grants and the programs that you offer in your department are critical to small businesses like mine and others, right? Tell us a little bit about, for our listeners and viewers who have not really thought about this before, do you have counterparts in other states? Are states really, is this something that's happening in every state? Is this something that's unique to New Mexico? And if it's not unique to New Mexico, what else helps us to stand apart as we're pursuing these businesses and opportunities within the state to maybe come here to bring others and generate this innovation?
Most states have some type of science and technology initiative, but I really do believe that New Mexico is positioned a little bit special. Our legacy of innovation from the labs and going all the way back to the Manhattan Project, we've been at the center of so many great steps forward in terms of innovation. So we have a great aerospace community, as we were just talking about. We have a great cybersecurity framework to build off of, and then all the opportunities within aerospace, intelligent manufacturing, and generally the intellectual property spin out from the labs puts a really unique value proposition for New Mexico. All the DOE and DOD opportunities that we have the opportunity to, I think, really market New Mexico as an innovation hub, as a high-tech hub where companies can come from out of state and find all the tech talent they need, all the access to capital they need, and all the general entrepreneurial support that you need to stand up a business within science and tech. So while I think there are obviously other states that have innovation centers, I really think New Mexico's position, especially, and you mentioned sort of out-of-state opportunities with that. There's a huge opportunity around aerospace in terms of the aerospace triangle from LA to Albuquerque and from Albuquerque up to Denver, including Colorado Springs and Santa Fe, that there's a ton of momentum to commercialize aerospace technologies. And we're at that, the aerospace triangle really puts us in a special position.
Absolutely. And we've talked before with Casey Durad of New Space New Mexico, obviously, and have interviewed lots of folks from Virgin and businesses that are down at Spaceport America. And that is such, as we know, and you do as well, such a huge growth area here in the state and makes things very exciting. Going back to what you were talking about is the state being specially positioned. Let's talk a little bit more about the workforce. And you mentioned that briefly, that that we have this special positioning of workforce. From your perspective, what is that, and what are we doing that's setting us apart?
So I might show a little bit of my bias here, and it's because I worked primarily with UNM when I had the opportunity to go to school. But I know our three major research universities serve as great pipelines for science and tech talent. And so between working with the labs and developing Masters of Science project management track to use a tool that's very predominant in project management called Primavera P6, and creating a pipeline for workforce development, from some of the initiatives from CNM and their Ingenuity Bootcamp and Cultivate Coders. And there's just so much support and enthusiasm. STEM Boomerang, a lot of different organizations have taken it upon themselves to link talent with companies, and it's served New Mexico really well. And that's my favorite thing probably about economic development in general, is that everybody's pushing in the same direction. There's very few fields where if your business, it's not a zero-sum mentality, that there's the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts if we all push in the same direction. And it's really an attractive sector to be in. And I think individuals like the ones and organizations like the ones I mentioned are really doing a great job of connecting those dots and making sure either the students that are graduating with STEM backgrounds have access to jobs, and that those jobs have access to the best talent.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, I think that definitely we would completely agree on that front, right? And then just also adding in that even beyond the research universities, just working to provide mentoring opportunities for our youth. And oftentimes we think of the workforce starting at that college age, but in my mind, the workforce development starts in the elementary classroom. And so I think that that's really important with some of the initiatives. I'm excited about some of the upcoming initiatives that are being worked on for the state, that there can be some more growth of that area because you have to have those qualified workforce, right, to be able to grow your business. And that's something that I hope that we are helping to position New Mexico in a better spot, whether it's with our award-winning robotics team or with the amazing camps and programs that we do with young people as young as 6, right? And get them thinking about, what is this future, and how can we learn more and get them more inspired so that we can fulfill that whole high-tech hub perspective. So
I think that's a great point. I know there's been some great research about the benefits of including entrepreneurial studies within high school and middle school environments, and getting kids started so early on a science and tech track pays dividends, much larger in the long run. So it's really exciting that you have programs like that available in the space.
Yeah, well, certainly there's lots of programs like that happening out there, but it's just where our heart is at.
Yes,
So for sure. So awesome. So what are some of the special interests that you have? I mean, you've touched on a lot of things in your new role as the Director of Science and Technology, but what are some of the things that you see upcoming, and those things that you mentioned earlier? When time is appropriate, we'll make sure that we'll put the links and show notes as announcements are made, right? So that we can try and keep some of that updated for folks that want to check that out. But what are some of your special interest areas that you might have, Alex?
So from a state perspective, there's a program coming online later this summer and maybe this fall called the State Small Business Credit Initiative 2.0. And the baseline allocation for New Mexico from the Treasury Department is going to be about $56 million over 10 years. And it'll probably come in 3 tranches, but the goal is to make sure it reaches underserved communities and is leveraged 10x by the private capital community. And so if you look at what a successful completion of that program may look like, it could be a $500 million program over 10 years. And I'm really excited about the opportunities of investing in subsidiary funds who will go on to invest in portfolio companies that can have a wide impact. It's a reboot of our Catalyst Fund from 10 years ago that Sun Mountain Capital administered really well. And it's that program will serve sort of as proof of concept to Treasury to enable us to make more investments like that. And I think it's going to be a really interesting opportunity for New Mexico. In terms of my personal interest, I mentioned sort of behavioral science as my main nerd interest, I would say, but also the mission of abundance, which is why I became attracted to science and technology to begin with, is that we have all these obviously 21st century problems, and for a large extent, we're still trying to meet them with 20th century solutions. But some of the tech that's coming on the horizon can really sort of eliminate the scarcity mindset and provide abundance. And obviously, it's got to be around food, health, medical diagnostics, clean water, and shelter for what a population of, in New Mexico, obviously less, but globally about 9 billion people by 2040. And so there's a huge challenge to identify technology that can help meet those needs for a large population. And I think, we're at the point where only technology, may be able to help us with some of these things like climate change and some of the more serious issues that we face. And so there's not a different sector I'd rather be in for the next 10 years in New Mexico and more broadly over the next 20 years that it can really meet some of the challenges that we're facing today. And so that's sort of the promise. It's not just the flashy technologies. I'm attending the Santa Fe Creative Conference on Saturday, which is all about the immersive environment, Web 3.0, and non-fungible tokens and cryptocurrencies and some of that stuff. But the real promise is applying some of those new technologies and new breakthroughs to the basic human needs, working our way up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and really be able to sort of better our society. And that's what I'm most excited about in terms of science and technology more generally.
We need to bottle up his energy.
I know.
I'm listening to you speak, and
I love it. I love it.
I apologize. I know I can have an auctioneering cadence, so I'll try to talk at a more reasonable pace.
No, but it's a lot, and it's obviously your passion comes through all of that, and it's so exciting. So to go to the state reboot of Catalyst, if one of our listeners here, small business owner, tech developer, how's that going to affect, what can they do to set themselves up? Some of our listeners might be like, I've never done anything with the state on this level. So if you were to explain in the most basic of ways how a small business or someone with an idea in tech could actually benefit from some of these things, or even other services offered by your department, what would that be?
From our department's perspective, we're very responsive. So call, text, email us, and we'll get back to you. Our mission at EDD, and we have great leadership from the secretary level, from the governor's level down to our secretary and deputy cabinet secretary to our divisional leadership. Some really motivated and well-intentioned people who are all, again, pushing in the right direction, which is incredibly refreshing. But we're all incredibly responsive, and our goal at EDD is to support small businesses. So whether we can help you, or a program within our office or respective offices can help you, or we need to make an introduction to a different organization or a different agency or a different department, it could be very difficult navigating the labyrinth of state resources. And so we can either play a navigator role, making sure you're connected with the right individuals, support actively, whether it's through the grants, or sort of making you aware of what programs may be available, like we talked about through the State Small Business Credit Initiative. And again, making contacts with the necessary investors. I would say there's probably never been a better time to start a new business than right now. Between the state surplus, the new venture capital vehicle coming from the New Mexico Finance Authority, the State Small Business Credit Initiative, which is ultimately a program through Treasury. And then we have a great collection of venture capitalists and angel groups already in the state making great headway. And again, the capital isn't a problem for those organizations, at least for the next few years. And so it's a really exciting time to start a business. And it's just a matter of sort of getting into the loop, getting connected with somebody, and then that person can take you forward to whatever destination you need to reach.
Amazing. Well, I do want to say that you are incredibly responsive. I can't speak for others in your department, but I do want you to know, and I want our listeners to know, that we reach out to people frequently, and sometimes they respond quickly and other times we never hear from them. And I just want to say, Alex, thank you for replying so quickly and being, just even putting thought into it. And, I think we reached out in maybe January or so, and you said, give me a little bit of time to get my footing so that we can then have an even more productive interview. So definitely kudos to you for that, because not everybody's like that. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, I appreciate that. And we talked about sort of the human problems. A lot of our programs are challenged from a lack of outreach and having a partners available to sort of signal boost the message. So I really appreciate having such great partners and you all willing to engage with us. And it's been truly a pleasure.
Yeah, well, it's very fun to be here at STEM Southwest podcast and be able to talk to all different kinds of people doing important work and making a difference, whether it's in the state of New Mexico or beyond that, for sure. So did you have a question?
Yeah,
I can hear you over here, like you're ready now to
I'm breathing.
ask the next question.
So, technology is exponentially increasing. There's so much to keep track of. And when you think you have everything covered, something else new pops up. And so you have to divert your attention. So how do you, as a director of your office and your office in general, how do you kind of plan out how to prioritize which is most important in any given time? Do you take it small bites? 3 months, 6 months, do you look year? How do you just plan it out?
Fortunately, I've been able to benefit a lot from our statewide plan that was released last year. We released the State Economic Development Department released a 20-year plan with Stanford Research Institute outlining the track of the next 20 years for the 9 targeted key sectors, as well as some of the divisions and offices within EDD. And that's been great to have a roadmap and sort of a backbone for what initiatives to focus on. But that's also, again, the great part of this office specifically, and sort of the broad semantic definition of technology I've been taking is that it could incorporate almost anything. And so what would make the most sense for the public good, for economic development, for community impact? Those are the questions I sort of prioritize. And fortunately, the scope of work within the department allows you to sort of go with the waves as they come. And so having that many opportunities and all the different programs sort of competing in parallel makes it easier to prioritize when there's a clear economic or community impact that it can be gathered from focusing on an initiative. But really looking forward to engaging with all our partners. And it's not a matter of if or then, but yes and. And so getting all the organizations who are willing to be partners on board and engaging with all the initiatives. And fortunately, we're boosting our internal capacity through hiring and outreach and contracting out with other organizations, that it's created a real opportunity to focus on multiple initiatives at once, that would beyond just an individual office.
You were getting in my head because I was going to ask how many people actually work in your office and department. And based on how you operate, you need to have partners. You need to bring contractors. This is not just one group doing it. This is a collective effort. And that's what we like in New Mexico. There's a collegial effort. It's more or less all ships rise versus I'm going to have my own little area and you're not going to invade my space. And so I like that you're partnering, collaborating with so many groups and entities.
No, 100%. I'm glad you brought that up because one, it is a very collegial atmosphere. Everybody is very collaborative and cooperative, and a lot of psychological safety and some of the organizational behavior stuff that I like to think about. And so it's a great environment for actually getting stuff done, working together. I can tell you, from having worked in the academic sector and the private sector, that there's really not many environments like this where your leadership's supportive and focus on the right things and doing things the right way. And it's just really exciting opportunity. But like you mentioned, having great partners in the community, whether it's contracting out different tasks or having partners needed to, bear some of the load in these heavy lifts of projects and different programs, it's been really a unique atmosphere. And like we see, all ships rise. I like the stone soup metaphor that Drew Tolchin often brings out. It takes a village to raise the proverbial child. And all these analogies sort of circle around the same idea that if we all push together, that something really good can come from it.
So there's one partner I would think would be involved in this. I haven't heard you mention that you are a state entity, an administrative side of the aisle. What has been your interaction with the legislative side?
I just got my first dose of the legislative session, which was just a ton of fun. One of my favorite shows is The West Wing. And so being able to be a political wonk and pretend like I'm Sam Seaborn for a couple hours is truly a thrill. And so for the most part, they summon us when they need to talk to somebody within the economic development department for whatever reason, but we also get the chance to do fiscal impact reports. So any new legislation that may have EDD as a consideration, we do a fiscal impact report and look at how that law or the tentative bill may impact the business environment. And so getting to do a couple of the fiscal impact reports and agency analysis for some of the new bills coming on, like the TRGR, which is called Trigger, the Technology Readiness Gross Receipts Initiative from the lab, that got a little bit of a boost this year, was just a ton of fun. And likewise, we have great partners in the legislature that really creates a really fun opportunity in terms of political science wonks.
Melanie Stansberry, Shelley had worked with her on at least one of the committees,
STEM committee, right.
Committees and all that. And so she was a big promoter of STEM, and now she's at the federal level. So.
I think we have some really great legislators in our state that people are just really pulling together. And I often say is STEM and technology, it's not a partisan issue, right? Like if it's good for one, it's good for all, and it will help those ships rise. And we all need economic development within the state. And so the work that you do is super important. So I know you've been in this new position for only a few months. I want you, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. So feel free if you need to take a moment and think about this. But what's one of the projects that you can share with us that you're most proud of, like the thing that you feel like is making a difference, that you might have already been, it might have been something that you've worked on in the past, maybe not even in your role in economic development, but prior to that. But could you share with our audience what's something that really, that you're kind of stand back and this was a great project. This made the impact that I hope that, that we each hope in our own jobs and careers can make impact.
Sure. So I'm going to give you two answers, one from prior to EDD and one EDD answer. And so for the first one, sort of as a through line for behavioral science, when working with VisionQuest Biomedical, we had the opportunity to expand into multiple primary care clinics to initiate a telemedicine screening platform to screen diabetics for eye disease. And the problem we were facing was trying to train phlebotomists to use this big $10,000 Canon camera that none of them had experience with, especially as a contract organization where we didn't have any sort of direct control over the employees. And so there's a challenge within VisionQuest Biomedical to get our inadequate image rate, which was about 40%, to a more manageable level. And then if we made that manageable level, then we'd be able to expand into about 10 primary care clinics and access a larger group of diabetics to screen for eye disease. And so I was in charge of redesigning the training mechanisms. Again, where a human attention problem was responsible for holding back a technological innovation. And so I developed a very simple sort of checklist. There's a great book called The Checklist Manifesto that talks about how strong a simple checklist could be. So a simple checklist with simple images going down a simple process decreased our inadequate image rate by 50%, which was our KPI, our key performance indicator. And as a result of that reduction, we were able to expand into multiple primary care clinics, got call lists, and we're able to screen way more people for diabetic eye disease. And so it's this really interesting opportunity to be able to apply something from behavioral science that actually can have some kind of public good. And along those lines, that's the project I'm most excited about working with the Economic Development Department. Is I'm the designee for Secretary Keys on our Connect New Mexico Broadband Council. And so for a little personal story about broadband, I was working with Christa St. Vincent Regional Cancer Center, as I mentioned, when the pandemic first started. And they were looking at giving telemedicine opportunity to northern New Mexico, which is some of the populations that they serve. And there was plenty of people who didn't have access to broadband, so they couldn't use the telemedicine. And now we're talking about chemo follow-ups, preventative screenings for cancer. I mean, a disease that pretty much is at the top of the list for people in terms of fear and negative outcomes. And it was so crazy to me that lack of broadband kept people from telemedicine, kept people from cancer care. And so technology that we have, relatively figured out, broadband, that just wasn't leveraged properly or didn't reach the communities that need to, actually had negative health consequences for a large population. And it was absolutely devastating to me that people were held back from science, education, access to economic opportunity, all the things that broadband can leverage if it's available, and that these communities, because they lack broadband, lack some of the healthcare benefits that would have come from it. And so that's one I'm most excited about, is the mission of the Connect New Mexico Broadband Council is universal broadband for New Mexico. And I'm extremely excited to be participating in that group, because it's the backbone of so many other technologies, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's economic opportunity or finance. Everything else is going to come from access to broadband. And so to be able to lay down a strong foundation in that regard really means a lot to me.
Yeah. And that's no small undertaking, right? Like this, and it's a real problem in rural New Mexico and even parts of urban New Mexico. We've done interviews before with other broadband providers and companies that, talk about there are even those spots, even in the middle of the urban area, that you wouldn't expect, but there is this challenge with broadband. So
yeah, we've our work cut out for us. I think the fourth largest geographic state in the region,
right,
but
right.
A lot of people
there's
are
a
pushing
lot
the
of
same
solutions.
direction.
Yeah, we're looking at a lot of different kinds of solutions, right? Whether it's a satellite solution or, really laying down some fiber and doing what that takes, but using some of those satellite solutions, I think is really interesting. And my thought is, if New Mexico can solve this broadband issue, then we can have a model that can help so many other states, right? Because of the unique, whether you're talking about the mountain range, which provides its own challenge, right? And so that's really interesting. It's good to hear those stories. And I really appreciate, it's very special how they're kind of linked together there, right? And that telehealth could really be very life-changing, particularly amidst a pandemic, right? I can imagine you don't want your clients who have suffered with cancer or diabetes or, already have some health issues to go out and be more exposed. And
but even so, you can't get physician assistants, doctors, nurses to many of these communities. So telemedicine really fills that gap that there was no possibility to do that previously. So it's been definitely a positive step in the direction. So you've been somewhat the cheerleader, and we believe in everything you're saying. We know it's happening. We're excited. We're glad you're in your position, but we are not so naive to think that there aren't challenges or barriers you're having to face in your role here in the state. And do you have any of those that you can perhaps share with us?
I think in terms of small business, access to capital and access to talent pipeline, it remains to be large problems. Ironically, Dr. Tuttle from Tramway Ventures talks about this a lot, that New Mexico is towards the top of the country in research and development per capita, but we're the bottom in terms of venture capital per capita. And so it creates a market opportunity, but also a problem for a lot of small businesses facing these challenges. And I've heard it from venture capitalists that although we have a ton of tech talent in New Mexico relatively, there's a lot of deficit of management talent sometimes. And so these VCs are often looking for somebody they're comfortable investing in a Series A, someone that they want to give $5 million to. And a lot of times it's difficult if it's a spin out from the labs or a small business innovation research company, that they might make a great chief technology officer, a chief science officer, but they may not be the person to be the chief executive officer. And so with all these things in terms of access to capital, all these programs coming online, I think will go a long way. But in terms of the talent pipeline, I think we need to start thinking outside the box in terms of providing fodder for those pipelines and making sure that there's a new crop of fund managers, a new crop of CEOs that are available, whether it's leadership development from the universities, on the job training or apprenticeship programs, that we need to be able to engage multiple creative solutions to try to meet the problems that most companies face, which is around managerial and financial sort of expertise and core competencies, and then access to capital, which goes along with the managerial and financial expertise oftentimes.
Excellent response. I mean, we've seen this actually play out, particularly with lack of venture capital. And New Mexico is oftentimes referred to as the flyover state. And there's so much going on here. It's just a matter of filling in those, addressing those challenges and increasing its visibility and bringing the money we need.
And all of that goes back to human capital challenges. Like you mentioned, we're at the converging point of multiple exponential technologies, and there's new products and new softwares and new technologies available every day. And so it's a human attention problem. We all operate under maximum cognitive load these days, so it's really hard to add one more thing to the plate without taking something off. And so making people aware of these programs and doing the outreach necessary is a huge component, I think.
Absolutely. Wow.
And you're from New Mexico, correct?
I'm from New York originally. I was born and raised in New York, but came out when I turned 18 to attend college, and then fell in love with it and never left. You mentioned the perception that New Mexico is flyover country, and I could see that perception. When I was getting ready to go out to New Mexico from New York, all my friends would ask me if I spoke Spanish, because why would I be going to Mexico for college? And it's devastating to me now that, having lived here for a while, we're number one in PhDs per capita, oldest wine growing region in the country. Santa Fe has the most women-owned small businesses per capita and the most museums and art galleries per capita in the country. And then in terms of 6 out of 7 microclimates, 310 days of sun, depending where you're at, that's 11 months of golfing weather for me. And, I couldn't really imagine a different state where I'd rather be. And so we need to get ourselves up off the bottom of the list that put us, behind Mississippi and so many different things, including broadband and education. And again, so much of those are linked together, that if we could accomplish one, it acts as a keystone habit or the first sort of major domino to fall, and we'll have cascading effects.
Absolutely. I could not agree more on so many different levels. And I'm glad that we stole you here from New York. We used to live in Vermont, and I would make the trek from Vermont to Illinois quite often. And I always said, before we moved here, I said to Bob, as long as we don't move to New York, I'm good. So I'm happy to be here in New Mexico. But you're right. Everybody does think, do you speak Spanish? I didn't know you spoke Spanish.
Or what money do you use? And the truth be told, I went back to school, and 9 months before we moved here, I was at a conference here, and I had no vision of ever moving to New Mexico. So why would I want to live in this place? And we've been here over 20 years, and we love it. And we often joke, and probably on several podcasts, we like to brag about it, but we don't want to brag too loud, because we don't want to overwhelm what we love on a daily basis.
Oh no, we're the hidden gem of the Southwest. I've been telling everybody UNM is the Wharton of the Southwest, and there's just a ton of reasons to love New Mexico. And I totally agree with you. I mean, I'm a little bit spoiled because I've been in Albuquerque these past 16 years, but I haven't dug out a car from snow since I left New York, and I definitely don't miss those experiences.
I often say to people, I don't ever want to shovel snow again. Living in Chicago, spent way too much time shoveling my car out, digging the car out. So I'm with you. Good. Well, so good to have you here, Alex. What is it that our audience can do to support you in your new role here at Economic Development Department?
I'd say the main thing is just to get involved, find a way to collaborate with us, reach out to us. We're really willing partners in all these programs. And similarly, we were talking about with the legislature, we know good ideas don't come exclusively from government. Some people are the mindset that good ideas rarely come from government. So bring in good ideas, bring willingness to collaborate. and great partners. And that's what we need. Again, we need to just rise the tide so that all ships can benefit. And I think that's the key thing to be able to support is bring us your ideas, bring us your projects, bring us your companies, and we'll figure out a way to support you.
Fantastic. Anything else?
Yeah, so we our last interview, we forgot there was a question we used to ask our New Mexican guests. And so, hey, you're with us, Alex, we're going to ask you this question. So you really need to think about this and give it a little thought. Red or green?
Oh, wow. I'm spoiled. I go green all the way. I started working at St. Clair's Winery for a long time, and they had a green chili wine. And so it may not sound very good, but it's actually delicious, and it's sort of carried over into breakfast burritos, pizza. I'm a big green guy. I don't forgo red, but green is usually my preference.
I love that. That's my preference
too. Absolutely. So if any of our audience wants to contact you, Alex, what is the best way for them to reach out? And
my state cell phone is 505-690-4593. So feel free to call or text me at any time. Again, I'm very responsive and would love to engage. And similarly, my work email is alexanderm.greenberg@state.nm.us. Like my title, it's long and obnoxious, but if you
put a link to it. We'll put a link in the show notes. So
and then LinkedIn and Twitter, anywhere you can find me, I'm ready to engage.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your passion and your knowledge. It's been really exciting. You might not have the traditional STEM background, but we know as Director of Science and Technology that you're out there making a difference and working. And we wanted our audience in particular to hear from you so that they could connect to you, so that together, they could reach out and really make a difference. And I think we believe that's why we started this podcast, is that we really believe in the connectedness of people. And so thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a critical component of a successful and thriving ecosystem, that connectivity. So really appreciate the work you're doing, and looking forward to collaborating.
Hey there, this is Shelley, and I am so glad that you have stopped by STEM Southwest. Can I ask a favor? If you've gotten some value out of our episodes, if you are just powered by nerd power and are excited about what we're doing, or if you're new to us and you've got just an interest, subscribe now to help us grow by doing that. Then take a moment and give us a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast player, because we could use your support and help. We are trying to raise up an army of STEM Southwest supporters. And then last, think about sharing our podcast with your friends, your families, or even complete STEM strangers, because, it's all about making the world a better place and having more STEM rock stars highlighted and connected. Stop by our website if you're looking for resources, and you're going to find a lot of things that's going to grow over time. So continue to stop on in and join us. Subscribe now and support STEMSW.com.
You've been listening to the STEM Southwest podcast. Nerd on, fellow STEM nerds.